Well, if there is one thing to be gleaned from this game, and it's something that you might have guessed before if you've been watching Washington Huskies football, it is that this team will only go as far as Michael Penix takes them. Truly, only as far as Michael Penix takes them. Washington Huskies defeat the Stanford Cardinal, the tree, 42-33 in a game that, when you look at the score, you maybe think Washington beat them handily. Not the case. Washington's defense is not a championship defense. I'm sorry to break it to you. Washington's running game is not a championship running game. Again, I'm sorry to break it to you. And if you're watching on YouTube here as I'm recording this, you can see that the Stanford Cardinal record is 2-6, meaning they are not a good team. And if you've been following Washington Huskies football, you know that they struggled with Arizona, they struggled with Arizona State, and now they're struggling with Stanford. And these are bad teams. These are below 500 teams. And they even let Cal score a bunch of points in the second half, particularly the fourth quarter. These are the worst teams of the conference. And yes, they did beat Oregon, and that was a huge win. But they are playing to the talent level of the teams they are playing. Regardless. I mean, this is since the beginning of Pac-12 play. And it is a concerning development because before this, against Boise State and Tulsa and Michigan State, they were dominating. They were beating teams that they were better than in a way that they should have. I mean, they should have blanked Michigan State. You know, they just should have blanked Cal. Last week, the offense didn't even show up. And so what we're seeing is a dismount from the emotional toll the Oregon game specifically took on them. And, you know, they are surviving and advancing, as I kind of, mentioned last week. But when you have a team that's 8-0 like this, you have bigger plans in your mind for them. You set your sights on the big prize. And when you see weeks like this, and Stanford in the beginning of the second half is threatening to take the lead, you start to look at the schedule that's coming up, and the next four teams that they're going to play are UCLA, Utah, Oregon State, and Washington State. All top 25 teams. Okay? Up until now, you've only played Oregon, which is a huge. Listen, I'm not going to discount how big a win that Oregon win was. It was. And they are having a serious hangover from that win because they are not dominating in the way that they should, especially last week at home against Oregon State. And if you watch this game at Stanford, that stadium was maybe 10 to 15% full of Stanford fans. I mean, it is possible that Washington maybe had as many fans there as Stanford. They are not about football, especially with a team like this. You cannot show up in those upcoming games the way that you've been playing against Arizona and Arizona State and Stanford and expect to win those games. And don't let this running stat that you see here of Dylan Johnson, 18 carries, 84 yards, and a touchdown fool you. They had nothing going into the fourth quarter, essentially. Will Nixon, 1 carry, 6 yards. He's supposed to be the best running back on your team, allegedly. Tybo Rogers, 2 carries, 12 yards. And Dylan Johnson got most of his in the fourth quarter there on that touchdown, which happened after a miraculously lucky drop by Stanford there in that fourth down play where Stanford was ready to march the field. It was 35-33 Washington, and Stanford was going to march down that field, but the guy just straight up dropped the ball on 4th and 2 on that trick play that nobody from Washington was around him at all. So incredible, incredible fortune. And listen, I know that there's something to be said about surviving these games and advancing, but that usually happens, once for a great team like this, where you get really close against maybe a bad team, but you still manage to pull it off. This is now 3 of the last 4 games. That is what happened. You are playing to the level of a bad team, a below 500 team, and you are barely surviving. Let's talk about the UW offense. Michael Penix, again, you will go as far as Michael Penix takes you. And at the beginning of this game, he looked a little rusty. He barely made it out of that Oregon game, and a lot of people that are watching, Dave Mahler mentioned it, that he just doesn't look right. He doesn't look the same. He had that bad rib injury, it looked like, at the end of the Oregon game. And at times he's just overthrowing it. I mean, that's one of his things. And listen, I guess that's better than underthrowing it and getting it picked, but he just doesn't look the same as he did in the first 4 to 5 weeks of the season for whatever reason. But still, listen, 4 touchdowns in this one. And it's going to show an interception, but that interception is on Odunze. And I mean, we'll talk about the receivers here because, listen, I really like our receivers, all right? Let's not get that wrong. And they might have the best receiver trio in the country with Odunze, Jalen Polk, and Jalen McMillan. Now, Jalen McMillan, I don't even know if – I mean, he's not showing up on the stat sheet here. He's still not right. I mean, I saw his name. I saw him on the sideline, but McMillan still injured, it seems like. But Jack Westover – Jeremy Bernard, Devin Culp. I mean, those are, I think, Westover and Culp are tight ends. Bernard is just definitely a tertiary receiver. But Odunze had a mixed day. Okay? In the beginning part of the game, meaning the first half and maybe the first half of the third quarter, excellent. He made those Odunze plays that you are accustomed to seeing, and what's going to get him to be, one of the top wide receiving prospects in the NFL going into the NFL. However, one of the big reasons why this game was as close as it was because of Odunze's mistakes. Now, one of them was he fumbled the ball inside the 10-yard line when the Huskies were about to score. Gave the ball back. Stanford went and scored. And then, again, Huskies are in the end zone, and he doesn't fight for the ball, and the Stanford cornerback picks him off. So 14 points taken off the board because of Odunze. I'm not going to say that was Penix's fault, that pick, because Rome had his hands on it first. You got to fight for the ball there. You got to fight away. I mean, a Stanford defensive back. There's really no excuse there. So, mixed day for Rome. I will not take away how great his touchdown was. He is capable of excellence. Moving to Jalen Polk, I've been seeing a lot of statistics about how he is one of the most efficient receivers in college football, and I love to see that. And he played like that today. He made one mistake. He had a drop. But other than that, 5 catches, 148 yards, and 2 touchdowns now. One of them, of course, came on that 92-yarder, which is, I think they mentioned, maybe the longest play in, I don't know, a long time for the Huskies. They mentioned like a Jake Locker play that was maybe like 50 or 60 yards, but this might have been the longest play in Husky history, or at least recent history. And great job fighting off the cornerback, which was a guy that was there was a pass interference, a defensive pass interference on that. He fought through the contact and ran that 92 yards for a touchdown. So full credit to Jalen Polk. I look forward to Jalen McMillan getting back. But this running game, ladies and gentlemen, of the Washington Huskies is a problem. Last year, I was way, way more confident with the guy from UVA. I forget his name now. Papa, or Daddy. I forget. Weird name. They have a lot of Samoan type guys on this team that shuttle in and out. But was it Wayne Taulapapa? No, that might be a guy that's still on the team. Anyway, the Washington Huskies run game is non-existent. And I mentioned this before. I'm going to sound like a broken record, but I'm going to say it again. There will be teams over the next 4 weeks within Pac-12 play that will just play defensive backs because they know how terrible your running game is. They will scheme. And if you're lucky enough to make it into the college football playoff, there will definitely be teams like Michigan and Georgia and Ohio State and Florida State and whoever else makes it in there that will figure you out and know that you only have a pass game. So do whatever you need to do to develop this running game in practice, because I thought Will Nixon was the running back of this team. He got 1 carry for 6 yards. And Dylan Johnson pretty much did nothing all game. I remember they went run heavy on at least 1 or 2 drives in this game. They ran to the right, and they had nothing. I mean, their blocking scheme, their linemen maybe are just terrible at run blocking, and they specialize in pass blocking. And this Stanford defense really, Penix was getting all day to throw. He was getting all day to throw. They got a little bit of pressure there, maybe in the third quarter, but man, I haven't seen Penix have this much time to throw in a long time. So kudos to the offensive line in the pass blocking respect, but Stanford was getting no pass rush. I couldn't tell you anything about their pass rush. Okay, moving to the other side of the ball. With Stanford on offense and UW on defense. Ashton Daniels, this annoying little quarterback of theirs that ran a play that I've never seen before, which is you take it and you run it up the gut with all of your players, Huskies, spread out on either side. It was very, and he didn't even do it from shotgun. He just did like a direct snap and ran it in, completely unprepared by Washington. That's how he got his one of his touchdowns. He also ran in another one, threw one to well, it was fun rooting for him when he was playing against Colorado, but now that Ayomanor was playing against us, it was horrible. I mean, this guy is a very scary receiver. And again, I'm going to throw this caveat out there. If not for him getting injured in the third quarter, which he did, and, ice up. But, go ahead and take care of that shoulder. I'm glad you didn't finish this game, because it might have been a different result if you did. 9 catches, 146 yards, and a touchdown. And, man, this Ayomanor, whenever you go to the NFL, I'm going to draft you in fantasy because you're a hell of a receiver. I'm glad that you didn't finish this game. And Tiger Bachmeier, we didn't see, I don't think, any of them when he was playing against Colorado, but we sure saw a lot of them in this game. He is like a little annoying possession receiver, like a Cooper Kupp type. Not as good as Cooper Kupp, don't get me wrong, but when you have defensive backs as bad as Washington does, it makes them look like that. And he's the guy that on that trick play threw the ball to the receipt. I don't know who dropped that. Is it going to show who got a target but didn't? No, it doesn't show who got a target but dropped it. But man, that guy must feel terrible. That guy that dropped that 4th and 2 trick play. Ashton Daniels had a pretty good game. It's going to show here 31 for 50, 367 yards, a touchdown, no picks. But the run game was Ashton Daniels. 17 carries, 88 yards, 2 touchdowns. But the most surprising thing to me, and I had to look this up, I didn't realize that E.J. Smith is Emmitt Smith's son, and he's pretty bad. He didn't get the genes of his dad. I looked at some of his stats, and I guess he's been injured, but he's a senior. And I don't know that he's going to be going to the NFL. A little bit surprising. Their run game, outside of their quarterback, was not there. In fact, the other quarterback on their team, their backup quarterback, Justin Lamson, also ran for a touchdown. So when you're talking about just their running game, it's Emmitt Smith's son, 5 carries, 18 yards, and then Casey Filkins, 5 carries, 9 yards, Cedric Irvin, 2 carries, 8 yards, Bryce Farrell, 2 carries, 0 yards, Tiger Bachman, 1 carry, -3 yards. So, hey, this Stanford running game doesn't look great, but also kudos to the Washington run defense. I mean, you did a hell of a job. All I saw today, actually, was problems on the pass defense. So, and also when the quarterbacks were running. But kudos to you stopping the running backs. Now, as we dissect the players on this Washington Huskies defense, Eddie Olofosio is the only player that I have confidence in from game to game. In this one, 10 solo tackles, 12 total. Didn't do anything else, didn't have to do anything else. But Jabbar Muhammad is very inconsistent. He gave up a ton of yards to Ayomanor and Bachmeier in this one. He did have a sack, tackle for loss, and a pass defense. And that's what you're going to get from him. You're going to get some big plays and some terrible plays. And that's what he showed today. Carson Bruner got a half of a tackle for loss and a pass defense. There's a lot of little scattered stats here. But Stanford was marching down the field at will on this team when they were passing the ball. Even though there's 6 passes defensed here, it really didn't matter. Stanford was going to put up 40 easily if that guy didn't drop the ball in 4th and 2. I don't know why they're throwing to that guy. I don't know who that is. I had not seen him, but if they were, of course, if Ayomanor was still in the game or the pass was to Bachmeier, then this is a different story. This is a loss for the Huskies. So, you know that feeling you get when you're watching your team and the other team is on offense? You either feel confident or you don't. And with the Huskies, I don't. And, of course, I hope the run defense continues to be as good as they were today, but you're going to, be facing a lot better running backs than this. And to be honest, when you look at how well the quarterbacks did at running today, they ran for 100 yards. Between the Stanford quarterbacks, they ran 20 times for 100 yards and 3 touchdowns. So that should humble you. Lot to get better at. We don't need these type of games where we are slumming it against some of these bad teams, the worst of your division. Need to be sharper. 4 games coming up, like I mentioned, that are going to be a lot more difficult. And I'm going to say one other comment overall about college football that is a big flaw, and that is that you have too few games, too few inter-conference games, because these teams within the conference end up cannibalizing each other, and you don't get a feel for who is actually the best team in the country. There's a lot of people that talk about from week to week how the referees in the conference will just give the calls to whoever has the best chance of making it into the college football playoff because that's best for the conference. And now that is Washington in the Pac-12. And I don't want to win like that. And I'm sure some of these other teams and other conferences are saying that because when you are given those advantages, you are not learning correctly how to fix your mistakes. And this assessment that they do from week to week, it's like, well, who's the best team in the country? Well, you can't really tell because it's just SEC teams playing SEC teams, Pac-12 playing Pac-12, Big Ten playing Big Ten, Big 12 playing Big 12, and that's what you see every year. And you only get, really, after you consider the powder puffs that they play, which is at least like one or two other games, you're getting one game a year, usually, if that you're playing a legit team outside of your conference. And that's a problem. And I don't mind if that means sacrificing some of these interconference games because you need to, you need to be able to see Washington versus Florida and USC versus Georgia and Michigan versus Florida State within the season. You need to be able to see stuff like that in order to really assess who's good and who isn't. I don't like just seeing the same games every year. It doesn't tell me much, and like I said, you're just kind of cannibalizing your conference. So that's just a general takeaway. But that'll do it for this recap. A lot to work on in terms of running the ball for the Huskies and pass defense for the Huskies because this Huskies defense has barely any notable players. Olafoshio and Jabbar Muhammad, maybe that's probably it. Carson Bruner and ZTF, barely. Zion, he might be injured. I don't even know where he is. And Carson Bruner sometimes shows up, but this team has barely any names on that defense of people that shine. So those are two things. Hopefully, it's tough to resolve all this stuff within a week, especially in college. But those are the points of improvement that need to happen, or else UW is not going to win these next 4 games and give themselves a chance for the college football playoff. If you're watching on YouTube, please go ahead and subscribe. I really appreciate it. We are at 75,000 views on YouTube, but have far, far less subscribers. So I would really appreciate it if you are watching, if you made it this far, please subscribe on YouTube. If you are listening to this as a podcast, whether it's Spotify or Apple Podcast or Samsung Podcast or Exo Player or Amazon or any other podcast platform, give us a great rating and drop some feedback in there just to let me know your opinion on things. We're also on TikTok and Twitter and Instagram and we got some great reels and shorts on there that I think you'd enjoy if you're a football fan. Thank you all for tuning in to this episode of the Football v Football podcast. Until next time, go Huskies, and have a fantastic day, football fans.